Thank you for stopping by at the Movie Marquee. Our podcast reviews well-known movies and contains spoilers. The podcast may contain mature subject matter and mature language. Listener discretion is advised. Enjoy the show.
Quiet on set. Places, everybody. And action.
Welcome, everyone, to the Movie Marquee. Today, for your listening pleasure, we're going to be talking about the 1971 release from Stanley Kubrick, A Clockwork Orange. With me are my two favorite droogs, Ted.
It's funny how the colors of the real world only seem real when you vidi them on the screen.
And Ken.
I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain.
Nice. And I am Eric. If I've taught you much, my little droogies.
Yeah, I don't think you've taught us anything, but that's okay.
I haven't taught you anything. You know, I think we're going to all be schooled on this podcast today. Ted, tell us a little bit about some of these particulars of this movie.
Clockwork Orange was directed by Stanley Kubrick. It was written by Stanley Kubrick. It's based off of the novel of the same name by Anthony Burgess. It has a running time of 136 minutes. It was released on February 2nd, 1972. It had a budget of $1.3 million and a box office total gross of $114 million. A Clockwork Orange stars Malcolm McDowell as Alexander DeLarge, Warren Clark as Dim, James Marcus as Georgie, Michael Tarn as Pete, Patrick McGee as Frank Alexander, Adrienne Corey as Mary Alexander, Sheila Rayner as Mum, Philip Stone as Dad, Anthony Sharp as Frederick, the Minister of the Interior, Aubrey Morris stars as P.R. Deltoid, and Carl During stars as Dr. Brodsky.
Hey, that Philip Stone guy, is he the
Shining guy?
Yeah, from The Shining?
He plays Delbert Grady in The Shining.
That's what I thought.
He's one of the reoccurring actors in Stanley Kubrick's universe.
Delbert Grady, absolutely.
Philip Stone was also in Barry Lyndon, and also Patrick McGee was also in Barry Lyndon. And the guy who plays the chaplain was in Barry Lyndon as well.
Malcolm McDowell in Barry Lyndon?
He makes fun of it, though. He makes fun of the fact that these actors got to be in it and he wasn't.
Philip Stone has a little bit of a big role in Barry Lyndon, but the other two are relatively minor parts.
And that's what Malcolm McDowell was saying, was the main actors of his movies usually don't get bigger roles in other movies. He keeps on using those same people that do the small roles over and over again, but not the big leads.
So all roles lead to Barry Lyndon, is what you're saying.
All roads lead to Barry Lyndon?
All roads lead to Barry Lyndon.
A few out of this movie, but there was two actors that came back for multiple Kubrick movies, and that was Peter Sellers and Kirk Douglas. Kirk Douglas starred in Paths of Glory and then in Spartacus. And, of course, Peter Sellers starred in Lolita and then Dr. Strangelove.
Lolita. That's an interesting movie, as is this one. And unfortunately, we will not get to Barry Lyndon in this series. Maybe down the road we'll all take a deep dive into Barry Lyndon. But let's talk about what the critics thought of Clockwork Orange.
We'll start off with the tomato meter. It is certified fresh at 86%. The audience score scores at a 93%. It's hard sometimes to find the actual critics' reviews from 1972. I found 3 on each side. The major critics of the time were really kind of split on this movie. I couldn't find a more positive review than our friend Gene Siskel from the Chicago Tribune. He gave it a 4 out of 4. One of his quotes was, "Kubrick's contributions are his wit and his eye. The wit, too much at times, is as biting as in Dr. Strangelove, and the production, while of another order, is as spectacular as in 2001. Jay Cox from Time magazine, he gave a positive review and stated that it's a merciless, demonic satire in the future imperfect. Vincent Canby from the New York Times, he wrote another positive review and said, "In my opinion, Kubrick has made a movie that exploits only the mystery and variety of human conduct. And because it refuses to use the emotions conventionally, demanding instead that we keep a constant intellectual grip on things, it's a most unusual and disorienting movie experience." But it was a very positive review. Now, the not-so-nice reviews. Dave Kerr from the Chicago Reader stated, "It's a very bad film, snide, barely competent, and overdrawn, that enjoys a perennial popularity because it confused moral position appeals to the secret Nietzscheans within us." So, yeah, he didn't like it. And normally I would go with Roger Ebert last, but Roger Ebert from the Chicago Sun-Times didn't like it either. He said, "A Clockwork Orange is an ideological mess, a paranoid right-wing fantasy masquerading as an Orwellian warning." And then there's Pauline Kael from the New Yorker. She stated that the directors used to say they were showing us violence real face and how ugly it was in order to sensitize us to its horrors. You don't have to be very keen to see that they are now in fact desensitizing us. We become Clockwork Oranges if we accept all this pop culture without asking what's in it. When I was reading about all of the critics, she had a thing going with Stanley Kubrick where I guess this was an ongoing thing. She liked Paths of Glory, and she wrote a really fine review of that movie, but she hated Dr. Strangelove, and 2001 basically called it a gigantic piece of crap. So she really soured on Kubrick for whatever reason. And this was an ongoing thing with her. She would write opinion columns about him and everything. So I don't know if he spurned her for a interview or what the deal was, but she did not like him.
All right, so her review really doesn't mean anything.
It's pretty harsh.
It's biased. She comes in there with
it is. She calls him Stanley Strangelove, is what she ends up calling him. It's pretty interesting.
Paths of Glory or Blades of Glory, or whatever you want to call it, it's not really like any Kubrick film. It's
Kirk Douglas.
Douglas's movie, yeah.
Spartacus was Kirk Douglas's movie, but Paths of Glory was a World War I movie that Kirk Douglas starred in. It is a very, very fine film. It's one of my favorite war movies.
What about Blades of Glory? Do you like Blades of Glory?
Not so much. I don't care for the Napoleon Dynamite guy.
Oh, I hate that guy with a passion.
It was interesting, though, to hear Roger Ebert's review, though.
It was.
I felt like his and the one before, I can relate a little bit to what they were saying.
And what she had to say about the desensitizing violence. We can put a pin in that and come back to that after a while.
The one thing I noticed about those reviews is none of them were very wordy. Have you noticed our past reviews that use all these big words that no one can pronounce? They were all pretty much straight to the point. I either liked it or I didn't like it.
The toughest one was the Nietzschean. That was the hardest word that I had to come up with.
Yeah.
They were pretty straightforward.
They were.
For the most part.
All righty, Ken. Well, tell us about this movie.
Clockwork Orange. In the futuristic Britain, Alex is the leader of the gang of Drogues, George, Dim, and Pete. One night after getting intoxicated on a drug-laden Milk Plus, they engage in an evening of ultraviolence, which includes beating up an old person, a fight with a rival gang. Then they drive to a country home of writer Frank Alexander and trick his wife into letting them inside. They beat Alexander to the point of crippling him, and Alex rapes Alexander's wife while singing in the Rain. The next day, while truant from school, Alex is approached by his probation officer, P.R. Deltoid, who is aware of Alex's activities and cautions him. Alex's Drogues express discontent with petty crime and want more equality and high-yield thefts, but Alex asserts his authority by attacking them. Later, Alex invades the home of a wealthy cat lady and bludgeons her with a penis sculpture while his Drogues remain outside. On hearing sirens, Alex tries to flee, but Dim smashes a bottle in his face, stunning Alex and leaving him to be arrested. With Alex in custody, Deltoid gloats that the cat lady died, making Alex a murderer. He is sentenced to 14 years in prison. 2 years into the sentence, Alex eagerly takes up an offer to be a test subject for the Minister of the Interior's new technique, an experimental aversion therapy for rehabilitating criminals. Alex is strapped to a chair, his eyes are clamped open, and he's injected with drugs. He is then forced to watch films of sex and violence, some of which are accompanied by the music of his favorite composer, Beethoven. Alex becomes nauseated by the films, and fearing the technique will make him sick upon hearing Beethoven. He begs for an end to the treatment. 2 weeks later, the minister demonstrates Alex's rehabilitation to a gathering of officials. Alex is unable to fight back against an actor who taunts him, attacks him, and becomes ill, wanting sex with a topless woman. The prison chaplain complains that Alex has been robbed of his free will. The minister asserts that the technique will cut crime and alleviate crowding in prisons. Alex is released from jail only to find that the police have sold his possessions as compensation to his victims, and his parents have let out his room. Alex encounters an elderly person whom he attacked years earlier. The elderly person and his elderly friends attack him. Alex is saved by 2 policemen, but is shocked to find that his former drogues, Dim and Georgie, are the policemen. They drive him to the countryside, beat him up, and nearly drown him before abandoning him. Alex barely makes it to the doorstep of a nearby home before collapsing. Alex wakes up to find himself in the home of Mr. Alexander, who is now using a wheelchair. Alexander does not recognize Alex from the previous attack, but knows of Alex and the technique he suffered from the newspapers. He sees Alex as a political weapon and prepares to present him to his colleagues. While bathing, Alex breaks into Singing in the Rain, causing Alexander to realize that Alex was the person who assaulted his wife and him. With help from his colleagues, Alexander drugs Alex and locks him up in the upstairs bedroom. He then plays Beethoven's Ninth Symphony loudly from the floor below. Unable to withstand the sickening pain, Alex attempts suicide by jumping out the window. Alex wakes up in the hospital with broken bones. While being given a series of psychological tests, he finds that he no longer has aversions to violence and sex. The minister arrives and apologizes to Alex. He offers to take care of Alex and get him a job in return for his cooperation with the election campaign and public relations counteroffensive. As a sign of goodwill, the minister brings in a stereo system playing Beethoven's Ninth. Alex then contemplates violence and has vivid thoughts of having sex with a woman in front of an approving crowd and thinks to himself, I was cured. All right. That's the end of my story.
It's funny listening to you to read it, though, Ken. Oh, boy.
I never thought I would hear the word penis sculpture come out of Ken's mouth. That was worth the price of admission, folks.
And what recent future are we talking about here, Ted? 1973? What era is this movie supposed to take place in?
This is something that's highly debated. I'm surprised that the Wikipedia plot version stated that it was even Britain, because there's people that don't even believe that it's set in Britain. There's a lot of people that believe that it's set in a post-communist Russia, especially because if you look at how he says his address, it comes off very communistic in its description. All we really know is that it's a dystopian future in which society essentially has crumbled. You have groups of these gangs essentially running the streets and doing whatever they want. You have a government that's paralyzed by whether it's inaction or whatever against them. And this goes too, as far as the government goes, when the prime minister or the head official comes into the prison to pick somebody to take the Ludovico technique. As he's talking to either the warden or the chaplain, they're talking about rehabilitation. What he says in basic is, I'm not really interested in rehabilitation. I just want to clear out the prisons so we can start putting political prisoners in jail. I mean, it's not as dystopian as, say, Orwell's 1984, but you can really see where Ebert got the whole idea of an Orwellian nightmare.
Oh, definitely.
As far as
you can get that from that. And obviously, this movie being from the early 70s, none of us saw it in the theater originally. Where did you first see it, Ted? I have my theories.
I saw it in college, of course.
How much acid did you drop prior to watching this movie in college?
I actually didn't take acid until probably about 10 years ago.
About 10 minutes ago.
This wasn't the first Kubrick movie I saw, but images from this movie that I can remember through the years. And the images, of course, of Malcolm McDowell's eyes being held open and the Droogs walking alongside the river.
Total Reservoir Dogs moment there, huh?
Very much so.
Mm-hmm.
Those things really are what prompted me to, and then falling in love with 2001 and Full Metal Jacket. This was one of those inevitabilities that I had to see. And once I saw it, I completely fell in love with this movie. Says something about me, I think, probably.
A little bit. Ken, when did you first see it?
think it was like in the mid 90s, living with a roommate, and just one of those late night movies that I just happened to watch. I think it was only being shown probably late at night because of its subject matter. Years later, I watched it again. Ted actually invited me to go see Malcolm McDowell over at Hollywood Palms over here. He was making an appearance for a showing of A Clockwork Orange. It probably was the 40th anniversary.
Did you guys see it in the theater?
I didn't go see it.
Ken didn't come with me.
Yeah, I watched it beforehand, and I just basically told Ted, hell no. By this particular time, this movie had actually made me kind of sick and nauseated, and like Malcolm McDowell in the movie, if I ever saw it, I felt like I was going to throw up and be violently ill.
Was there like a director's cut in the theater? Anything like additional footage?
Kubrick actually had his assistants destroy all the unused footage.
Yeah.
He did a Q&A after, and of course he did a sign before I got to meet him, and I got 2 of my prized collector's pieces signed by Malcolm McDowell. Back in the 70s, the theaters, instead of posters, they would have movie cards.
Yep, movie cards.
Penis sculptures.
Penis sculptures,
I got
yeah.
2 penis sculptures.
He's not kidding, folks. He's not kidding.
I got 2 movie cards. One is from Britain and the other's from America. The reason that you know that they're from 2 different places is on the bottom. The British one has the rated X on it, and the American version just has the rated R. He signed both of those for me. Those are 2 of my favorite collector's pieces.
Now, this is originally clocked in at 4 hours long.
Right.
And he had to edit it back down to, what was it, like 2 hours and 10
And he
minutes?
had to make some changes to get the R rating.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm surprised it still got an R rating. But we had this discussion when we did Wolf of Wall Street. How did that get an R rating? Was there a chair in this movie that they had to place to make sure that it got an R rating?
Not like Eyes Wide Shut. But before we go into that, Eric, when did you see the movie for the first time?
Honestly, I don't remember. Probably sometime after high school. Again, saw it on video. I know that. And I remember seeing this going, what the hell is this? This is before I even knew who Stanley Kubrick was. I had no bias coming in. I had nothing to compare it to for Stanley Kubrick. I honestly don't remember it. I remember watching the movie. I remember having a bunch of people watch it all together. And I watched this and I'm like, what the hell is this? It was like watching like the Who's Tommy, but just more hardcore nudity. I mean, I almost thought I was dropping acid. I'm like, is this really what I think I'm seeing here? I didn't like it. I did not like it then, and I never watched it again. And just until we did this podcast here, I watched it for a second time. I watched it for a second time. I watched some of the specials on it and stuff, talking with the actors and the critics. Some interesting stuff, how this movie revolved around the government of Britain and how they do censorship in England is really interesting, actually.
It's understandable. It's a very polarizing movie.
You know, this is the type of movie, polarizing is, dude, you're saying it lightly. This is the type of movie, and I think we're going to come out on the side here when we finish this. You either love this movie or you are just not really a fan of this movie. Not necessarily hate it, but you're like, a little uncomfortable. I'm very curious to how we have our movie reviews at the end of this one, how we describe this and how we go into these details, because I'm really looking forward to this.
The beginning sets the tone, and I think depending on your mindset, it can lead you to 2 different ways of thinking about this movie. If it's something that you're uncomfortable with at the beginning, I think you're going to be uncomfortable with this movie in general, and you might not see some of the good things that are actually in this movie because of how hardcore it is at the beginning of this movie.
That is true. And one of my jokes
or some of the funny stuff.
And there are. And one of my jokes about really, really bad movies, and I'm not saying this is a really bad movie, but one of my jokes for any movie that, like these screwball comedies or just some stupid movie where you're like, why did they even make this? My go-to saying is hardcore nudity couldn't help this movie. Well, this movie's got some pretty hardcore nudity in it.
Well, one of the actresses said to Malcolm McDowell, I guess you're going to find out that I'm truly a redhead today.
Right.
And he did.
And he did.
But you're right, Eric. It's really hard to be indifferent or in the middle on this movie. This is a movie you either get or you don't like it at all. I know you joked about taking drugs, but it was an experience where I swear to God I wasn't on anything.
Now he is, but not that.
It opened my mind. The way I describe it, it's like when you hear a piece of music for the first time that really just blows your mind, is how I attribute it to it. Ken had mentioned the first 20 minutes of the movie. The first 20 minutes of the movie is probably one of the toughest watches in movies. There are a few, of course. The POW scenes in Deer Hunter come to mind, and the end of Deer Hunter.
Just the Deer Hunter in general.
Just a couple of scenes from the Deer Hunter where they're forced to play Russian roulette. That's one of those things you can never unsee. And that's the same way kind of with Clockwork Orange.
I don't know. The Deer Hunter is a very powerful movie, and that Russian roulette scene is extremely powerful. You're right. You can't forget that. But I don't get that with these rape scenes. And I mean, the violence is pretty campy, let's be honest. I'm one of those people that just don't get it. And I think I need Ted to try and explain this to me. And if anyone can do it, it's Ted. Sell me on this movie, because someone needs to.
We'll get into the themes and stuff of the movie, but the home invasion and break-in and rape, that's pretty hardcore. It's purposefully uncomfortable. I had mentioned that there were some changes that Kubrick had to make to get the R rating.
Oh, I'm sure it was a lot hardcore than what we saw.
The biggest change that ended up getting him the R rating was he changed the whole scene of Alex having the threesome. That was not supposed to be sped up to the William Tell overture. That was supposed to be straight up 26 minutes of hard going full
to town, yeah.
And that was able to satisfy the MPAA enough to get them to take the X rating off in America. But the British still couldn't. They labeled it X, and that's before he even pulled it from the British theaters. But that's another part of the discussion, too.
Which is very interesting as well.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting fact about that scene, too, is what Malcolm McDowell will say is that Kubrick had a thing for the brunette, and that Malcolm McDowell was purposely, really physically more with her than the blonde, and it actually was ticking Kubrick off. Me and Ted was talking about this offline. I don't know how much Malcolm McDowell is just full of it at this particular point, just because, Stanley Kubrick is dead and can't refute anything. But it just seems like some of the things he said in this commentary that is on the 40th special edition. I like the scene before that, the scene when they're in, I guess it's kind of like a all-purpose store because it's kind of got records.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of everything
magazines.
in there.
And then it has 2001
Did you
right
see
there.
that? Yeah, right up front.
Right
Perfect.
there.
And it also has Magical Mystery Tour.
Yeah, saw that as well.
And it has the cover of Adam Hart Mother by Pink Floyd. And it has a couple other really famous albums. One of them's a Neil Young album. But the reason that the Adam Hart Mother is amongst those albums is because Kubrick had actually went to Roger Waters and David Gilmour from Pink Floyd to have them do the part of the soundtrack. And they originally were on board, but then they realized when they got the contract that they would not have final say over the cut of the music, and that's when they pulled.
That sounds like Roger Waters and David Gilmour.
I could see, based off of, the material of A Clockwork Orange, and how somebody, if they don't have control over how their music is used, I could kind of see where that would scare some people off. Now, it is Roger Waters and David Gilmour. I mean, they did collaborate and create The Wall.
We should have had some Pink Floyd Uma Guma in that movie.
Uma Guma, yeah.
Uma Guma, that's psychedelic, all instrumental. That would have played. Yeah, that would have played well.
That store that we're talking about that they're in, I guess ended up turning into a McDonald's.
Oh.
So kind of a sad thought, though. I mean, I look at this.
Capitalism at its finest.
I guess so. Location.
That's right.
But this is one of my favorite parts in the movie is the store. It's just
and I love the outfit McDowell's wearing, too.
That looks like a Prince outfit. I was sitting there going, it's going to start singing When Doves Cry.
I wouldn't be a bit surprised if Prince didn't take some of it, because one of the things that I noticed after I had read some articles about this, the article had said that pattern part of their look after Clockwork Orange is David Bowie. And I never noticed it until watching it through these 2 times before the podcast.
I can see that.
I think it's either Pete or Georgie has the yellow around his eyebrow that's sparkly, like Ziggy Stardust. And Dim has the red lipstick like what Ziggy Stardust had. And that's just one of the pop culture influences that's been, The Simpsons did a whole thing with Clockwork Orange, and Rob Zombie's done a lot with Clockwork Orange. And in Tarantino, you had mentioned the scene of them walking next to the river.
Reservoir
Dogs. Well, the whole rape scene of Singing in the Rain was very eerily similar to
Stuck in the Middle with You.
Mr.
Cutting the ear off.
Mr. Blonde doing the Stuck in the Middle with You by Steelers Wheel. This is a movie that went right into pop culture, for better or for worse.
The two women that he brings back to his flat, well, I'll say his parents' house.
His mom and dad's
his
house?
Mom and dad's house, yeah.
Mumsy and daddies?
Because I guess in the book, he's 15 years old. No,
and
how
they're
old
10,
he is.
and he drugs them.
Okay, so they're at this place. They're having some type of popsicle, and I'm sure that this was a sexual... You know where these two people are going right now after the scene here. There's no playing around with this.
Or maybe there is playing around with it. I don't know.
There is some playing around with this. But it actually makes him seem, before he goes to prison, normal. He's taking two girls home and having a three-way here, but he isn't coming off as being scary. He's not coming off being somebody that I'm afraid he's going to kill these two women. He's being very nice to them.
And they to him.
And after that scene is when he sees his boys, and they're questioning where he's going with everything. And it makes me think, could he be turning the corner here and trying to go straight? Ted shakes his head no. And I agree with you to a certain extent, Ted. I'll agree with you there. But he is actually horrified once he actually physically kills somebody. Because he's never killed anybody until the cat lady.
Cat lady.
At least not that he's aware of, because the writer's wife dies later. And he doesn't know about that. She kills herself. But he doesn't know about that until later. So I think there's a certain level that he won't go past. And that was killing until he just reached that point with the cat lady. Because she struck him in the head with a Beethoven statue, which was kind of ironic that it was that. Because everybody, I guess, in the future has a Beethoven statue in their room.
And a giant penis.
Of course they do.
And pictures of naked people all over the walls. What kind of society does
that
Stanley
is the
Kubrick
future,
thinks we're going to be in?
I don't know, man. It seems like mid-70s Britain to me, whatever you want to call it.
I was waiting for Austin Powers to show up.
Exactly, right?
Yeah, baby.
He has that very similar look as what Alex has, too, walking through that little mall. You're right, Eric. The 70s went through a period of time as far as like the interior design that was kind of a futuristic
especially
look,
in England.
I think it's because the space program of the 60s led to a lot of this futuristic look. But we see it in 2001. Stanley Kubrick isn't afraid to tell us what he thinks the world's going to look like down the road.
One of the coolest things that I think about as far as you look at the futuristic design, I've always been fascinated with Alex's sound system that he has. It's a Bang & Olufsen
that's good stuff.
Prototype. The mini cassette thing was actually never for public use, but the turntable was, and I guess they still make a version of that. Its use in the movie, amazingly enough.
And in the future, everybody has a great sound system. You have the writer. He has a big sound system down there where he's pumping up upstairs to drive Alex crazy.
That's somebody else's house.
Is that somebody else's house or is it his house?
I thought it was his house.
Yes.
They put him in someone else's bed and he jumped out the window?
When you see that house, the house is only one level. Inside, there's steps that go down. There's no upper floors. Above
must be one of those conspiracy people that were with him, the two people that came over to interview it. Maybe it was one of their houses.
Probably, because they're subversives. If you want to start to get into themes, this is one of Kubrick's things with this movie. The severe right and the severe left of both sides of the political spectrum essentially come back together and meet at a certain point. And that's what he's showing through the writer and his friends, who are leftist subversives writers, and the PM, who is essentially a right-wing authoritarian dictator type. Essentially, they're out for the same thing, which is power, but it's just two different ways of coming about getting it. And Kubrick even mentioned that in an interview, that that's exactly what they were going for. He said that the only redeeming person in that actually has a moral compass in the entire movie is the chaplain. And the chaplain, if you look at it, he's the only one that really speaks truth.
The chaplain in the jail? That guy was creeping me out kind of early, wasn't it?
The chaplain or the head guard, who's very eccentric.
Oh, the head guard was like Schultz from Hogan's Heroes?
Yeah. Right,
no, the chaplain who, when he was talking with him, when he was reading the Bible and he was talking with him, I thought it was going to go in a completely different direction.
The chaplain did too, because he quasi-condones homosexuality when they're walking through the library, the stacks. He's like, no, that's not what I was talking about, but Alex says that. After Alex has had the treatment and they do the presentation before all of the government officials, he comes out and says, well, he has no choice. He ceases to be human.
Earlier in the film, he actually says, goodness is something to be chosen. When a man cannot choose, he ceases to be a man. I was going to use that as my first line at the beginning, but I did the singing in the rain instead. I think the chaplain has a couple of the best lines in the whole film, because he says that line while they're in jail.
Right.
And he's talking to him about making the choices. The choices are up to him. I love the chaplain here. I actually wish I would have seen the chaplain towards the end of the movie to kind of bring it back to what he had been saying. The last third of the movie is him going backwards and meeting everybody that he has done somewhat wrong to until he gets to the end. And then he's back to being what he was at the beginning of the flick.
Right. I agree wholeheartedly that he's the only person that speaks the truth. Everybody else has an agenda. Even our narrator has an agenda. Alex's whole point of being a narrator is to try to make us see his life through his eyes. It's a manipulation.
Whenever you have somebody who is doing a narrative, it's a manipulation because we're only hearing his point of view. The chaplain, the only agenda that he has, and I feel this is true about him, to see people like Alex come to know God and make those right choices. So he does have an agenda, but I think it's one that's more pure than everybody else's. Everybody is more about what it's going to do for me than do for them.
He believes in rehabilitation.
Yes.
Whereas everybody else is not.
But he also buys into Alex's fakery because he's just trying to tell him what he wants to hear.
Because he is a pure character, he's able to be manipulated by Alex, but he's also able to be manipulated by the other side as well. And he finds himself essentially, like I said, the moral middle. He's the only good character.
Alex is trying to read the Bible. And in fact, Malcolm McDowell actually says that the hardest part, memorizing biblical lines. He said he had a really hard time with that. But when he has the thoughts of Jesus carrying that cross and he's behind him whipping him, actually is one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. And Mel Gibson kind of did this too in The Passion of the Christ, where he played a centurion and he helps nails Jesus to the cross. Same thing here. We see Malcolm McDowell's character slashing Jesus and he's finding joy in it. He's got that look of, take that, Jesus.
Yeah.
I think there's different intents, though. I think Alex's intent is he sees the violence.
He loves the violence.
Definitely has a predilection towards violence.
I appreciate just the visual look of it. I don't know if the next scene is like Spartacus.
It's from earlier in the Bible, in the Old Testament. One of the many, many battle scenes. My guess it would probably be David after he has his rival killed and steals his wife.
I'm not sure if it's that. I don't believe David's on the battlefield at that time. It's a very cheap looking. You have one thing turned over in the background, and so it's very simplistic.
Chariot type.
Chariot, yeah. Just very simplistic.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's that, but I think it would be funny if it was Spartacus. You kind of just fun to imagine that.
He's talking about those sections of the Bible is what he's talking about. And this is the thing with discussing the New and Old Testaments. The Old Testament is full of those sort of things, and that's why Alex has more of a connection to the first half of the Bible rather than the second half, because there's a lot more violence involved.
Why don't we get into some of our core themes here?
I thought we already did.
Well, we're going to get a little bit farther into the core themes. What I like is someone born evil. I think that's a very interesting question to ask in this one, especially with this cast.
No, I think you came to it on your own, Eric. I don't think you were born evil.
Yeah.
Oh, no, me personally. I wasn't talking about me. I am evil.
Oh, okay.
Is rehabilitation possible for me? I don't know.
I don't know. I think it depends on each individual. We go to this idea of free will towards predestination. Are you predestined to be evil?
Well played, Ken, bringing up free will and predestination.
Eric knows that's one of my favorite subjects. Somebody doesn't see that there's a problem. There's never going to be a desire to change, no matter what it is. It could be evil, good, or like Ted's Westerns that have happy endings. There's nothing you could do to change Ted's mind. He was born with that idea that John Wayne has to die in the movie or it's just not going to be good.
And in this movie, Alex doesn't see anything wrong. He's happy. He's go-lucky. Yeah.
Bruce Dern.
There's no care in the world for him. But I do think that people can change. I think you can have a mindset of being one way, and I think there are events that can change your perspective. If we look at Alex's character, Alex does get changed by this therapy. He does get sick. There seems to be more of a decency with him during the later third part of the movie until they reverse what they've done and start retraining his mind to be more like what he was. I think people can be changed. I think somebody might be born with a desire to do more evil, or a drunk, could be mean-spirited, or whatever the case may be, and some other people are born to fall more on that other side. But there are certain events in our lives that can change that, can change our outlook and change our trajectory. I'm not the same person I was when I was in my teens or in my 20s. I like to think that I have evolved. And it's just like my opinion of this movie. My opinion of this movie in my 20s and 30s are going to be different than my opinion of it now in my 40s.
This movie has a little bit of a similarity when we're talking about rehabilitation to Shutter Island. As a plot for rehabilitation, can someone be rehabilitated? And if not, do they revert back to their old ways eventually? Which we see in both movies.
This is one of the core themes and questions of the movie. Is Alex evil? And can he be rehabilitated? I'm not sure he can. He has a thirst for violence that can't be quenched. And this is not a really one-on-one comparison, because you take somebody like Ted Bundy, who was able to act normal in regular life until something flipped. Then he had to kill. And when he had to kill, he had to kill. He couldn't stop. But then he could pause and go back and be relatively normal again. I see a lot of the similarities in Alex. Alex is a master manipulator. He will manipulate every situation he has, and they actually have to brainwash him and change his brain to get him to be good, and therefore taking away his free will. So he's still not good. He's good by proxy, essentially. It doesn't change the fact that he wants to hurt somebody or beat somebody up. It's that now he physically can't, because he gets the pain and whatever that causes internally. I think there are certain people that can be rehabilitated through therapy and through prison and things of that nature, but I don't think Alex is one. Alex is evil.
I mean, we can debate the good and evil question all day long.
I mean, he manipulates everybody. He manipulates us as a viewer. He manipulates every situation that he comes into contact with.
I think it's hard for us to see with Alex because we're focused on one period of time in his life. We don't know what he's like as a boy. We don't know if he had this problem at a very young age. When did this kick in? What might have triggered it? He's really okay to his parents.
Because his parents are just like cardboard. They have no emotion.
His parents are the type of parents that could help also foster this type of, while no, there's no violent, they're not violent monsters to him, where take somebody like Richard Rodriguez's parents. I mean, his mom would beat him incessantly. They're not that, where they're turning him evil. They're kind of that hands-off, indifferent type of parents. They only want to see the good, because they never even really come to terms with the fact of what he's actually done.
No.
The best thing that shows them as parents is when he wants to take the morning off from school after what he did the night before, and the mom and dad are sitting across from each other at the table. And his mom believes this wacky story that he goes out and helps people. And that's how he's able to afford this expensive sound system. And that's how he's able to afford these nice clothes. Because they don't have jobs that would hold up that particular lifestyle that Alex is leading. I think that really shows that there was nobody really to stop or to correct Alex. Let's say if we go the idea of, was he born this way? Well, there was nobody there to stop him from going down that road and saying that this is wrong. They don't enforce a moral compass upon him in any particular way.
Let's say he's little Damien. Was he born evil? I think he was.
There's a difference here. I think for a kid to be a certain way and then need acceptance somewhere, and they find acceptance in a certain area that accepts them, and then they excel here. It's very possible that this character finds these type of people and not only is accepted into this type of lifestyle, but it excels in this type of lifestyle, and then it becomes its own drug, because all of a sudden you have the power, whereas maybe before he doesn't have the power because maybe he was a kid that didn't have friends. And maybe these people accepted him. This is usually how I see people's lives being changed, is by finding their identity. I was talking about identity this weekend with some friends. Identity is a big thing. And if he finds his identity with these thugs And then they take that milk that has drugs in it that basically gets them ready to be even more violent. There's a little things that are added. So when he's pulled away from those drugs, maybe he's not as violent as he is without them.
And how about that milk dispenser?
How about that milk dispenser?
Well, the milk is interesting because it's milk mixed with drugs. And there's 3 types that they sell there at the milk bar. It's Velicet, which is milk with speed or amphetamines. Synthemisec, which is essentially milk with mescaline, which is a hallucinogenic, which I think is what they're doing when we first see the first scenes of the movie.
Because they're all spaced out.
Yeah. And then there's adrenochrome, which is a derivative of adrenaline, which I think that's probably what they were on to get going that night when everything went down. Adrenaline and the method or the amphetamine. Because, I mean, everything is so chaotic and fast, that would make total sense. As far as one of the other points that you had made, Ken, I think he does have an identity. I think he's a natural leader. Take characters from our past episodes. He has a lot of Jordan Belfort in him from The Wolf of Wall Street. I think he's a natural leader. He fits right into leading his droogs, even though they rise up against him because he controls them with more of an iron fist. I think one of the most ironic things in the whole movie is they're giving him the technique. One of the things that they show him is videos from Triumph of the Will by Lili Riefenstahl, which was the movie about the Nazi super party they held in Nuremberg. That's what those pictures are from. I don't think that would necessarily affect him, and I think that's why they show that to him. He's a natural leader. He would see nothing wrong. I mean, he identifies with the Romans as far as crucifixion goes. He sides with the bad guy. He's not a good person, and I think that he would fit right in with that particular crowd. I think that's one of the more ironic things. So I think that he does have an identity, and they're trying to strip that identity away from him. His identity is going to lead him to either prison or death.
And I agree with you, but at the same time, as you mentioned The Wolf of Wall Street, we look at Leonardo DiCaprio's character in that movie, and at the beginning of that movie, he's kind of straight-laced. Takes people like Matthew McConaughey and Black Monday to basically change all that, because he's going in there and he's thinking the customer is the most important thing and working hard and doing all these things. It wasn't until Matthew McConaughey tells him, hey, you need to do drugs, and then when he loses the job, then he goes to the penny stocks and sees that they're doing something that could be profitable by doing something that's it's quasi-legal at best. That direction sends him into this bigger picture, and that's what I'm saying here with this character, and something led him probably to this point that made it the bigger picture. And if something else were to happen, he might have been a leader. He might have been the Prime Minister of England. We don't know.
But there was a natural charisma there that Jordan Belfort's character had regardless. There was always a charisma there. That's what Alex has. He has that charisma.
Jordan Belfort's character was not naturally evil. I mean, you kind of like the guy.
He became a version of evil. But Alex has that charisma that Jordan has. That's why I think that a good real-life comparison is Ted Bundy to Alex. Ted Bundy was one of the most charismatic people you would ever meet. This is a guy who was able to talk his way into any situation. He was a human chameleon. That's how he was able to do and get away with what he did for so long. Alex is just like that. Alex can manipulate and get himself into any situation he is. He can use every situation for his own personal gain. Even the whole idea of getting that technique was not to make himself better. It was so he could get out of jail in 2 weeks.
For him, that's why he did it.
Pretty much.
That's why he did it.
Yeah.
It was not because I want to become a better person. It was, I want to get out of jail as fast as I can so I can go back and continue to do the things that I was doing. What he didn't anticipate was the absolute evil that was perpetrated upon him by the government. And he underestimated their evilness.
Was it evilness on their part, or was it something that they didn't really know what the side effects of
They used him as a
what
guinea
they were
pig,
doing?
human guinea pig.
Yeah.
Somebody had an idea. What the government's doing there is essentially things that were very similar to what Dr. Mengele did at Auschwitz. He did medical experiments on human beings. That's why there's standards here in America as far as what doctors can do on people. That's why there's a board of ethics and
Here, this is set futuristic. It's set in a period where a lot of this behavior is more normal because you do have a lot more of these type of hoodlums out there. If Alex is in a different period, does he go to this? And that's, I guess, where the question I always ask, is he born evil? Well, it's hard to tell because what if this was a different period of time? Would there be that opportunity to become this type of evil? Or does he become a serial killer? I mean, like I said earlier, he does get freaked out when he first kills his first person.
But does he freak out because he killed somebody? Or does he freak out because he was caught?
I think he freaks out because he killed somebody.
And now he knows that there's a serious punishment coming his way. Because he's been able to use Deltoid to get himself out of a lot of other very nasty situations before. And they've given him a lot of leeway in being able to get him off of different other crimes. But he knows that if he crosses that line, there's no getting him any sort of leniency.
So does he have pure evil if he only does up to a certain point because he knows there's consequences? Because most people that are evil are to hell with the consequences. They're going to do it and just hope they're smart enough never to get caught.
That goes back to Ted Bundy. When asked why he did what he did, or would he do it again, he goes, of course, because I wouldn't get caught. This is the type of mentality that I believe Alex has. He's not upset because he killed somebody, in my opinion. He's upset because he got caught, and ultimately he wants revenge on Dim and Georgie and Pete because they set him up to get caught. He's going to take some sort of revenge on them.
Like I said, he doesn't kill up to this point, and it's like a reaction kill. He takes a moment to realize what he's done, and then he tries to get the heck out of there. I don't think he's ever wanting to kill up to that point. He likes his lifestyle the way he does. He likes to beat on people. I think he loves being the person in charge, the one who has all the power. He loves the power. I don't think he wanted to kill this woman. It's just a reaction of getting hit in the head by Beethoven that made him want to kill her, because he had that, hey, there's this line that I can't cross because if I cross it, I'm going to get in deep trouble. And I'm saying people who are born evil don't acknowledge that
They don't have that moral compass of right and wrong.
He's in it for the thrill.
It's an adrenaline rush.
Right, when he says that this is real horror show, when he says horror show, that means it was exciting. He is out for the excitement. Let's don't even begin to start to minimize the fact that he perpetrated a violent rape. And let's be honest, that was definitely not the first time that's happened.
Why doesn't he end up killing her and killing him? Why does he let them live? Why does he let the old man live when he says the one thing that gets him so crazy is an old person who basically sings and is drunk and has no purpose in life? He sounds like he wants to kill him, but doesn't, because there's that line that he isn't willing to cross at that particular point. I mean, even if he does it with his hoodlum friends, he doesn't kill them. He cuts Dim's hand. He pushes them into that ucky water that's probably really nasty.
The river.
Like, he doesn't ever threaten to really kill.
He wants to maintain his power, like you had said, over them. And rape is a power trip, too. Rape is not a sexual crime. It's a crime of power. In some cases, too, it's about making the person being raped feel bad. And that's what they get a thrill out of. If he hadn't killed before, it was only a matter of time.
Somebody eventually that would have stood up to him, that wouldn't let him have that power, that would force him into that situation, which is what she did. She didn't let him have that power over her, and she defended herself to the point where once she hit him with that statue, all the power that he had over her was gone. And so the only thing he had left was to eliminate the situation.
This was also a situation where it was one-on-one. He didn't have his droogs with him to hold back anybody. It was a one-on-one situation, and to maintain that power, he killed. I think the whole thing that he was shocked when Deltoid tells him that she's dead, I think that's all a show, too. He knew exactly what he was doing when he hit her. He beat her upon the head, and we don't know how many times, because Kubrick does a cutaway from that scene immediately and does a very ingenious cut there to the art. So you don't know how many times he hit her. We assume he hit her once, but I doubt that was what happened. I think that he got full of the adrenaline and everything, and I think he beat her until she died.
But I don't think that he had intentions to kill her. He's not a premeditated murderer.
No, he had intentions on raping her.
That it's all about the power. And if you kill someone, the power that you have over them is gone.
But it's also the ultimate power of being God. when you hear the psychology behind some of these serial killers and other murderers, it's a thrill out of being able to determine who lives and dies. That's the ultimate power trip. It was only inevitable that he was going to come to kill somebody.
We were talking about the room that they were in drinking the drug-laced milk. That first shot at the beginning of the movie where they focus on McDowell and pulling back is one of the coolest opening shots, I think, in the history of openings. I think it's really well done.
It is a cool shot.
It's amazing. And something that I hadn't caught until recently is he actually toasts the camera. And I think that's just a brilliant nod. And I guess Stanley asked him why he did that. He goes, Stanley, because I want to tell the people that they're in for a hell of a ride.
Exactly.
I think that's a brilliant little piece that he did there. It is. It's one of the most magnificent shots in a movie that has at least 4 or 5 shots that are just indelible that can never be topped.
This is a really well shot film. One of the problems I have with the movie is the fact that his 2 partners here become cops.
Really?
I really have a problem with that. First of all, it's very quick. I guess it's, 2 years later, and they're cops. And their mentality is the same.
Exactly.
So what do they sit around and they're drinking the milk and saying, hey, let's become cops? I just thought it was a little...
We don't know if they testified in court against him.
That's true.
My assumption is that they did. This isn't that big of a stretch of the imagination. I'm not going to get personal here, but I know of stories of people who are not good ending up being cops.
And they're both serving together.
It is a bit of a stretch.
It's a bit of a
stretch, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. I don't know if it's hard to catch, but when they're taking him to essentially drown him in the trough, Dim's badge number is 667 and Georgie's is 665, meaning that in between Alex is 666.
Which we don't see Alex ever again.
No, he doesn't have a number, but that's what the implication would there be.
If we think about it, when the truant officer shows up to his house, smacking him in the nuts, basically, he says something to him that he knows what he's been doing because somebody's been feeding him information. Snitching. And I'm wondering if it's one of them that's been feeding him one of the information, and that's what...
Somebody's been snitching on him. Why else would all of a sudden would Georgie and Dim decide that they're going to take over and lead them on a raid? They come up with this idea, and they tell him that there's all these jewels and money that's there at this health farm. It's all a big setup.
I think it doesn't happen until when they're back in that bar drinking their milk and stuff. When he hits Dim with his cane and hurts him, right there, I think it changes the whole dynamic. I think that's when they say, hey, we're not going to deal with him anymore. And that's when they probably went and said something about him to the...
And they sell him out.
Exactly.
Yeah, they sell him out, essentially. Those 2 becoming cops, they're still evil. They're not as probably evil as Alex is, but let's be honest, they're right there along with him. A person can only be led so far before they're doing it on their own, because then you get into the whole Nuremberg defense that we were just following orders.
I think they are probably just as evil, because now that they're cops, they could get away with a whole lot more. I mean, they could actually kill and not have any repercussions for it.
Why didn't they kill Alex at the trough?
That's a good question.
I think they thought he was going to die anyway, because they were going to leave him out in the middle of nowhere. Obviously, it was cold, so just leave him. Let him suffer, essentially.
They've never killed anybody, and they have a line that they won't cross either. He was in that water for a very long time. The fact that he did not die, and I think that was done in one take. You know, he was under that water. A few takes.
There is a spot where there's an air thing that he puts his face in.
It's gotta be nasty water.
This goes along back to our discussion with the chaplain being the only good moral character. Even the 3 cops that have Alex in custody, he's a complete and utter jerk and a smartass to them. But they beat the shit out of him. And they said that they know how far they can go up to the point of the law before it turns into them getting caught for abuse. Those 3 cops are not without sin. And hell, they basically said to Deltoid they would let him do essentially whatever he wanted to Alex. I kind of think Deltoid probably wanted to do something else with Alex. I think Deltoid had a thing for Alec. Deltoid was borderline a pedophile.
I was a little worried about that bedroom scene.
Exactly.
But then again, maybe he is the good guy here.
No, Deltoid's not. He's just as corrupt as everybody else.
He doesn't have to warn Alex to watch out. He does go there, and it does feel a little weird sexually there.
He gets paid to keep Alex on the straight and narrow. Comes out and basically says that. So he's going to get docked pay for Alex essentially going to prison for 14 years.
But he doesn't have to tell him
somebody.
that people are telling him what he's been doing. He doesn't have to give him all that crap. He doesn't have to say any of this stuff.
I think he knows Alex is going to do it anyway.
I'm not saying he's like the chaplain, but I don't think he's as bad as the other cops or most of the people in this particular movie. I think he might be one of those in-between guys that could go either way.
Or does Deltoy tell him this information that people are basically snitching on him to get something sexual out of Alex?
I could see that.
But we never really see it pay off later on.
It doesn't pay off, but is that the game that he's playing?
It's hard to tell, because especially when you have McDowell playing a character who is supposed to be, I guess, 15 years old. And what is he, 24, 25 years old?
In the movie version, he's 17. They did that because there is no way they could have him
naked as
15 and doing all of the things that he did. There's no way you could shoot the book directly to movie. There's no way.
Jodie Foster and Taxi Driver all over again.
It would be worse. You can't show a 15-year-old drugging and then brutally raping two 10-year-olds. Under no certain circumstances can that ever be on film. Well, there probably has been, but it's on dark parts of the web that only a handful of people who are very sick know about.
Or if you're Roman Polanski.
She was 12.
Or if you're Jerry Lee Lewis.
He married his cousin, so he could do that. There's no way you can put that on film. And his two friends, I think you hit the nail on the head, Ken, when you said that they became cops because they knew now all the more stuff that they could get away with.
The ultimate power.
I'm going to change gears here, and I want to just talk about how this is shot, because I love the lighting in this movie. A lot of natural lighting. He doesn't bring in movie camera lighting to film it. He uses the lighting that's there, and you get the feeling like you're in a home or that you're in a prison. He's got a beautiful gift with the lighting. And we've talked about this in other films that we've watched of Stanley Kubrick's. If I'm saying this movie works, it's a lot to do with how he films it. And
no, you're exactly right.
And no stages except for the bar that they go to get the milk. Outside of that, everything is an actual physical place. They were talking about the stage where they had that fight with the other gang. It used to be a
theater.
Where Charlie Chaplin would actually perform. And most of these places were within walking distance from Stanley Kubrick's home, because we all know that Stanley Kubrick doesn't like to travel to make movies. Closer to his house, the better. But I love the writer's house, by the way. I think that house is beautiful looking.
It's awesome.
I would love to have a house like that.
You talk about the lighting and the natural lighting. The guy who did the lighting for this movie ended up winning an Academy Award for Barry Lyndon. I know that Barry Lyndon is boring, but it's one of those. It's one of those.
It is
movies
shot beautifully, though.
It's absolutely amazing. And Stanley actually had a camera made especially to film that, because a lot of the interior sequences are shot at night, and it's shot by candlelight with no external lighting. It's an absolute wonder of filmmaking. How this movie is shot is one of the best things about this movie. It's almost intoxicating how freely it moves. Then you take how it's filmed and you put on top of it the music of Rossini and of Beethoven. It has that intoxicating quality that 2001 had. It's a perfect blend of music and film. That's one of the things that I absolutely love about the movie. I love the use of the Ninth Symphony, which is one of the most beautiful symphonies ever put on paper. When they go to the writer's house, his doorbell is Beethoven's Fifth in a higher key. Instead of bum, 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 it's dee, 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 dee. That's his doorbell.
Well, Beethoven just kind of seems to follow in the movie all around. Even when, granted, it is probably his room that the minister visits.
It is his room.
He's interested in the Beethoven stuff. He's not focusing on the dirty pictures on the wall or the cross of Jesus on it.
Right.
He's looking at Beethoven. And it just seems like Beethoven is the other character in the movie.
Kind of is.
And it's interesting because the way my mind works is that if they're trying to use the horrific imagery of the Nazis and the concentration camps and everything like that, why they didn't use Wagner, I don't know. Because, of course, Wagner unintentionally was used as the music of the Third Reich, mainly because Wagner was an anti-Semite. Wagner's music was used as the ideal of what German music was, especially by the Third Reich. It's amazing. Even the use of pomp and circumstance when the prime minister comes into the prison. You talk about how things are shot. The image of all of the inmates walking in a circle outside is a painting come to life. It's a painting by Van Gogh, an amazing painting of inmates in a circle. But that's Kubrick. That's what he does. And I'm not exactly sure, but I'm pretty sure I read somewhere, just doing research about the movie, that the outdoor scenes of Alex walking to his parents' apartment complex, that is the same area that Kubrick ended up shooting Full Metal Jacket in. Those areas are very similar.
I heard actually that area was built for higher living, but then became slums by this time, and that's why they were able to use as much as they were able to do. When he comes in, he looks at the elevator and it's broke. That's not staged. That's the actual building itself. Reason why this movie works is Malcolm McDowell's performance. He hits a home run here. I was looking at what he's done since, and he made a couple of good movies, but really after the early 80s, he makes a lot of crap. But here, he's the whole movie. I mean, there's some good performances here. There's some overacting, I think, in this movie here and there. But Malcolm's performance is spot on. Never at one time do I think he's overacting or underacting. I think he always plays it right, and I appreciate that. He does remind me of McGregor at times. I see at the beginning when he's talking to the old guy when he has the stick into his gut. Oh my goodness, that's McGregor right there. Like a facial and sound, it really, I was like, if they did a remake and he was still younger, I could see him playing that part. It looked like and sounded like him as far as how he acts it out. And even some of the struggles that he has, you look at him looking out at the water and you know he's contemplating suicide even then, even before being beaten up by the old guy and by being up by his friends, the cops. He already thinks his life is over because he had just went to his mom and dad's, and some rude guy who's renting out his room basically made him leave by telling him how much
punch him.
how much he was a burden to his family, which his mother crying, but the father isn't really standing up for the son either. At the same time, your son did just murder a person and you are surprised to see him home. I try to give a little slack there. The guy who's renting out the room, we don't know anything about him except that he decides to take shots at him and that's it.
Because he knows he can. He knows there's no way for him to fight back.
Yeah, especially once he saw him getting sick. Did feel bad about the snake.
Which is a human nature question. That guy knows that he can't fight back. So how does he treat somebody that he knows that can't fight back? He turns into a Facebook posting match under a comment page. He can say and do whatever he wants to Alex.
Well, he has all the power, as we've been talking about in this podcast. It's all about the power, and he has that power. It's all about power shifts throughout the whole movie. We see it with his hoodlum friends.
Droogs.
The power switches. We see it with the writer. Everything switches, and we see different people having power throughout the whole movie.
That's a good observation.
You're exactly right. And we kind of moved on, but one of the shots in the movie that I really like, and you talk about power and everything, the power of that shot where the old drunk guy is laying there and the image of the light coming down that tube or whatever it is and them walking towards him is one of the coolest but most menacing pictures ever because of the size of the shadows that they cast over him. That's one of the pictures that I have for the movie cards that I have. That guy got signed was that picture. It's an awesome picture. The power struggle, you're exactly right. And it's how people use that power. And it's a question that you encounter in everyday life as well.
You see it with the doctor and the Minister of the Interior. He has all the power. Then you have Alex has all the power because of what he did to Alex. Now Alex can do whatever he wants, even though now he's dangerous.
He's got a get out of jail free card now. He knows that he can do anything with impunity. There will be no consequences for him.
Until the power shifts again.
We don't ever see that.
We don't get to see that, but it's going to happen again.
You figure that it will.
It just will keep on shifting and shifting.
Well, as we both know here, this movie is filled with controversy when it comes to the ratings. No, not this. No, when it comes to everything. This whole movie is just one big controversy.
I thought this was made by Disney.
Mary Poppins, right. I know, right? There is a Disney version coming out, though, starring Malcolm McDowell. Ted, take us into this one. I know this is your baby here, and you know so much about this movie. The controversy is almost as exciting as the movie itself.
It is. It's amazing when anything sort of like this movie comes out, that it seems that there's a wealth of controversy that surrounds it. And we had mentioned when we did the Stanley Kubrick teaser that controversy seems to have found Stanley at every nook and corner that he would come upon. And a lot of that reputation comes out of this movie. This movie wasn't available for rental or viewing in Britain until the year 2000, after Stanley's death. He actually went to Warner Brothers and petitioned successfully to have them pull the movie out of the movie theaters. And essentially, there was no video VHS copies throughout the 80s and 90s. There was nothing. And the reason for that is because in England, after this movie, there were two major copycat crimes that were attributed to A Clockwork Orange. There was a rape of a Dutch girl in Lancashire in 1973, and the men were singing in the Rain. And there was also a 16-year-old boy. He beat a younger child while wearing Alex's uniform of the white overalls and black bowler hat. This sparked outrage amongst the people. People started to protest outside of Kubrick's estate, and he and his wife and daughter started to receive death threats. His daughter had to be pulled out of school because of the threats were so real. Essentially, they had to go into hiding. He knew it was going to be controversial, but he had no idea that it would go to this extent. That's essentially the crux of it. And it got so bad in England with people wanting to see the movie that video stores would have signs up that said, no, we don't have A Clockwork Orange, because that's how many people would try to find it. It became a underground cult hit. In 1993, there was a movie theater that actually in England that actually showed it, and Kubrick and Warner Brothers sued the movie theater to get all of the money that they had made from it and everything pulled off because they had showed it illegally. It's a sad thing that something like that would have happened. One of the things that we didn't talk about, there are some legitimately funny parts of this movie, and it's kind of sad that everybody concentrates on the horrible violence, which it is, and it makes the movie uncomfortable, but there are some legitimately funny parts of the movie. The cat lady, as she's fighting him, is screeching like a cat. Did you guys catch that when she's...
I did not catch that.
Of course, his interaction with the psychiatrist after he's attempted suicide, where he's looking at the pictures and he gives the funny answers.
And she's eating it all up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And when he's eating at the end and the prime minister is there.
With his mouth wide open.
Yeah, he's... that's pretty legitimately funny. Those are just a couple of things, but as far as the controversies around this, there was a point in time where the controversy got so bad that the British police department, Scotland Yard, which is their FBI, told him to leave the country because that's how many people were looking to kill him.
For his own safety.
And to do harm, right, to him and his family. Throughout the rest of his life, he wouldn't even talk about the movie. That's unfortunate.
Do you think he regretted making it?
He said he would have never have even made the movie if he knew what was going to happen.
Because of ticking off Gene Kelly with the singing in the rain.
Actually, Christiane, Stanley's widow, gave an interview after Stanley's death because the popular myth is that Gene Kelly snubbed Malcolm McDowell at an Oscars party.
At a party, yeah.
The theory always was because he didn't like that Singing in the Rain was used in the rape scene. Gene Kelly's widow actually ran into Christiane, and they talked about this, and the reason that Gene Kelly was mad at Malcolm McDowell and snubbed him was because Stanley never paid Gene Kelly for the use of Singing in the Rain at the end of the movie, during the credit scenes.
Does he own the rights to it, or did he?
Stanley was able to get the rights to use the music, use the song, but not Gene Kelly's version of the song. I don't know if there was some mix-up between the lawyers from Warner Brothers and everything there, but that's why Gene Kelly snubbed Malcolm McDowell. Because Gene Kelly is an artist himself, most of those guys back then were pretty comfortable about knowing that it's art.
It's all about the money. To
dispel one of those great myths. Yeah, it's all about the money.
Let's go to Ken. What are your thoughts on this one?
So I have a mixed reaction to this film. I violently got ill, as they stated, the first couple of times I watched it.
Kept you up at nights.
Yeah.
Hallucinations, yeah.
Did somebody hold your eyes open?
Made me want to jump out of a window. Watching it these couple times for the podcast, I have done a little bit of a shift I'm not totally sold that it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, but I have grown to appreciate it. And I think it has a lot to do with what we're doing here on the podcast. Going a little bit deeper, just looking for things to draw out of these films to find out what makes them work or not work. And I found out that more things worked in this movie the couple times I've watched it. I think the acting and the cinematography in this movie is near perfect. You have overacting in this movie, but those overactors have to overact because what Malcolm McDowell is doing in his part. There has to be a balance. And so you have people that are very low key, and then you have to have people that are higher than even what Malcolm's doing to kind of balance it all out. I think they do a very good job here. It is a tough watch. It really is. And I think it's kind of funny. You would think somebody a little bit more younger and a little bit more rebellious would like this movie a little bit more when I was younger. But close to being 50, I see some appreciation for it. I don't know how much appreciation yet, though. I think one of my favorite things about this movie is the roller coaster of how I feel about Alex. At first, I hate Alex. I want Alex to get what's coming to him. And then when Alex goes to jail, I'm like, what's next? I'm starting to like some of the things, even though he's a manipulator. He's manipulating me as part of the audience. And I appreciated that. When he gets the treatment, I feel bad then all of a sudden for Alex because he doesn't have a right to choose. There are some things I really like about him. I mean, his politeness offset with his evil. I like the mixture of it too. And then when we come at the end, when he is reverted back to the way he was, I want to go, oh, they should just kill them when they had the chance. So it's that wonderful roller coaster that's there that's making me second guess my initial thoughts about this movie. Until I've watched it more and know a little bit more of where I want to go with the grade here, I'm going to stay right in the middle and go around C to C+, because there's some things that it's hard for me to watch and enjoy. But to be honest with you, a couple weeks ago, I probably would have given it an F. But right now, it's probably between a C and C+, because now I see the beauty of what this movie is trying to be.
Cool. Well, I can't argue with you there, Ken. I do see the movie does have some positives and a lot of negatives. Honestly, for me, I don't get it. I just don't get it. And I really don't want to get it. I don't have any desire to want to make myself like this movie anymore because I'm really not that crazy about it. And I'm not even talking about the violence, the nudity, the rape. I just don't get it. And that's me. I think Malcolm McDowell is incredible in this movie. I mean, this is his movie. He's phenomenal. He is a great actor in this movie. And I'm sorry he really didn't do much after it because I think he has had a great acting career ahead of them. And he just didn't pan out like a lot of other actors of that era. The cinematography is really kind of stunning and breathtaking. I do like the use of all the natural light and the on location that they use. I think it really is incredible. One of the things we didn't talk about is their weird-ass language. Half the words in this movie, you don't even know what they're talking about. You got to watch it 2 or 3 times. You know, they make up all the words and the phrase. What do they call it, Ted? What's the language?
It's called NASDAQ.
Yeah, and I'm sure Ted will bring that up. I don't like it. Taking all that into effect, I probably will never watch this movie again, I'll be honest with you. And I like a lot of Stanley Kubrick stuff. I think he is a great director. I just don't know the tangent on this. I'm not sure why he made this movie. I don't know if he's going just for controversy or what. It's just not for me. It's not an F, and it's not an A. It's hard. I've been kind of wrestling with this one like Ken. When I first watched it, I was like, yeah, whatever. I'm never seeing this thing again. I watched it a second time, and I'll be honest, I could not watch it a third time. I really couldn't. And maybe I need to, just to really watch it again for some of the things we've talked about today in this podcast. And maybe I will do it. But for me, this movie is kind of like on par with Ken. It is a C. I don't hate it, I don't love it, and I probably am not going to see it again. All right, Ted, it's all on you. Bring us home.
Before I start, the reason that he made the movie was because there was a movie called Waterloo.
The ABBA story?
Was made in the early... No. It was made in the early 1970s. It wasn't a complete failure, but it was a failure enough. So all of the studios stopped making wartime period pieces because after 2001, Stanley's next project was going to be a biopic on Napoleon Bonaparte. And he had the locations and everything set to where he was going to film. He even had a deal with, I believe it was the Yugoslavian government, to use their army in the Battle of Waterloo sequences.
Because they still use the same weapons? Yeah.
Probably. But that fell through, and that's one of the great mysteries and shortfallings of what that project could have been for Stanley. And a lot of that goes into Barry Lyndon, because those battle sequences are absolutely beautiful. It makes sense if he had been able to shoot the Napoleon Bonaparte movie, it would have been awesome. But now my review. This is one of those movies for me. There are very, very few negative notes for me in this entire movie. I feel for the characters. I genuinely like the characters. I think the characters are well written, and this being one of Stanley's only solo screenplays that he wrote. It's a view of dystopian life, and it poses questions that I find are very interesting and like to discuss and contemplate. As far as being well shot, there are images from this movie that are some of the greatest images that have ever been put on film. The image of Malcolm McDowell's eyes being held open in front of the video screen is one of those. And they're images that you'll never forget. And I also love how the shots of the movie, they coincide with the cinematography and how it's shot and how it coincides with the music. I think it's a perfect marriage of those. Is it a hard watch? Yeah, it is. And I completely understand that it's not for everybody. The language, I understand too, to a certain extent. I understand Eric's quibble with the language. It can be tough, and sometimes you have to stop and think about what they're actually saying. It's hard to process because they use the funny NASDAQ language.
It's like they're speaking Klingon.
Yeah, it was a language that Anthony Burgess made up for the book, and they transposed it into the movie. That doesn't hurt anything for me. Some of the more interesting pieces of that language has ended up becoming into popular vocabulary, like droog and things like that. You can shake your head.
I have never ever heard that word before this movie.
Okay.
Ever.
There are definitely aspects of the movie that have entered into pop culture. And
In and out?
Have permanent,
a
little bit of the old in and out.
Yeah.
That's another one. This is one of Stanley's greatest movies. Too bad that the controversy caused him to basically disavow the entire project. I think that's very unfortunate. For me, this is one of Stanley's greatest movies. Malcolm McDowell in this movie, it's one of those performances that I don't know if the other movies that he made, I don't know if he would ever come up to this performance ever again. This is a once-in-a-lifetime performance that is almost unmatchable. It deserves its place as one of the most controversial movies, but also one of the best movies ever made. And for me, this is an A+. This is a top 10 movie for me. This is a movie that I will bring out and watch every couple of months. Literally, I will watch this every couple of months because I like the headspace that I end up in after watching it. It gets my brain fired up and thinking and working, and it leaves me with that good sense. Even though the subject matter might not be, but it inspires those questions. It seems like every time I watch it, I always have a new question that I can talk to somebody about, or I can ask about how somebody sees this particular aspect of it. I loved being able to talk about this with you guys.
This is your typical Stanley Kubrick film. We talked about this in the past, where his films are better when you could talk about it with others.
Ken has said a lot of really interesting things throughout the episodes of the podcast, but I don't think that there's anything that he said that is more correct than when he said that Stanley Kubrick's movies are something that you have to sit down with other people and discuss.
Clearly.
That's where the true beauty of his movies come. His movies aren't just a movie. There's questions to ask, there's discussions to be had with other people, and it inspires that so greatly that I think that was an awesome way that you said that earlier, Ken.
All right. Well, A+. How about that? Not surprised?
Just wanted to say there was a part where they were singing in the prison church songs, and then you got that one prisoner blowing kisses to Malcolm McDowell.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
How did they get Howard Cosell next to him to play that part?
Wow,
That
nice.
guy looks like Howard Cosell. I mean, he looks just like young Howard Cosell.
And this is one of the things we didn't even touch on was, Ken, you had mentioned overacting. The overacting of the head guard. Have you ever been a homosexual? And on the way he just does everything is just so over the top.
He
is one of the funniest characters.
He reminds me of Michael Palin in The Meaning of Life, when he's telling the soldiers, what to do, and they're like, "Well, I'd rather go home, Sergeant." Well, all right then, go home. But he was just so loud and to effect.
He reminds you of Michael Palin, and he looks like John Cleese.
Just a bit.
He is one of the funniest characters, especially when they're in the scene where they're proving that he's changed, and the look that he has on his face when the naked lady walks out.
Yeah.
His reactions are priceless.
He is the one character, though, that knows that he's a manipulator.
Yeah.
He's the one that says, don't buy into this, what he's been doing. He's just been trying to manipulate his way out of this.
Yeah.
He's the one character that actually sees through everything.
He sees the truth, but yeah. It's worth watching the whole movie just to see his reactions because he is legitimately funny.
And then the naked lady takes a bow afterwards.
Yes,
She's like, thank you.
Oh,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Thank you. Yeah.
So where are we going after this? What's our next one there?
So the next one for us is going to be Rob Reiner's This Is Spinal Tap.
Oh.
So it's going to go to 11,
Go to
right?
11.
So it's going to 11, my friends.
Right. Spinal Tap.
Awesome.
We're switching gears to something that's really, really serious to really, really funny. Okay. Well, stay tuned for that one, folks. Thank everyone for listening. And where can they find us on the old World Wide Web?
Well, we can be found on Twitter at @themovie_marquee.
You could also check us out at Facebook. It's called The Movie Marquee. Visit us on Facebook and join our community and bring up some subject matter. Chad posted a picture of the last picture known of Laura and Hardy together. So I thought that was kind of cool. And if you want to send us an email, feel free to send us an email to themoviemarquee@gmail.com.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys. Once again, it has been a pleasure taking a deep dive in this movie, and we will see you. Take care, everyone.
See you at the movies.
See you next time at The Movie Marquee.